Welcome back, weary travelers. Take a deep breath and let the weight of the day fall away as we journey back in time. Imagine a small, stone-walled village nestled in the emerald heart of 17th century Ireland, where the air smells of peat smoke and the ancient trees hold 1,000 secrets. In this story, you are part of a close-knit family, standing at the threshold of a night when the wind begins to change. It is a tale of community, of the quiet strength found in a simple village well, and of the enduring power of remembering what binds us together. Close your eyes, settle into the warmth of your blankets, and let the sound of the narration guide you into a deep, restful sleep as we step into the soft, twilight world of the village. You are 12 years old, the first time you truly understand that your village is small. You've been told it all your life, of course, that you live in our wee place by the river, in a hollow of land wrapped by low hills and higher trees, nowhere special to anyone but those who call it home. But on this particular morning, with the mist still lying in the folds of the fields and the thatched roofs beaded with dew, you feel the truth of it in your bones. You stand halfway up the slope above the village, the damp grass soaking your boots, and you can see almost everything that matters in your world in a single sweep of your eyes. The cottages huddle close together, stone walls and thick roofs of straw and heather, their chimneys sending up slow threads of peat smoke into the pale sky. The narrow lane washes between them like a trickle of mud-brown water, curving past the well, past the chapel with its single bell and leaning cross, down toward the river where soft mist clings low over the reeds. Beyond the farthest cottages, small fields stretch in patchwork, their boundaries marked by woven hedges and dry stone walls. To the north, the land rises into a dark band of forest. To the south, the hills lift, their tops rounded and bare. You can walk from one end of the village to the other in less time than it takes your mother to boil water for porridge. Yes, it is small. And yet, standing here, wrapped in the cool breath of an early Irish morning, you also feel something else, that this smallness is not emptiness, but concentration, as if all the lives lived here, your own, and those of your family and neighbors, and animals and trees, are gathered close together like coals in a hearth, holding one another's warmth. Behind you, a voice calls up from the lane. You! Come down from there before your dog thinks you've run off. You turn. Your older sister Riona stands with her hands on her hips and a half smile on her face, dark hair braided neatly down her back. She is 17 now and certain she is fully grown, though your grandmother still calls her my girl and swats her hand away from the sharper knives. Riona's eyes catch the low light like polished peat brown, but deep and shimmering. I'm not going anywhere, you call back. Not when Mam's making oatcakes. And I'm not carrying the water alone, she replies. So unless you'd like to eat your oatcakes dry, move yourself. You grin in spite of the chill and the damp soaking up your stockings. The familiar rhythm of her teasing settles your thoughts. You take one last long look at the village laid out below, every damp roof, every curl of smoke you could name, and then you jog down the slope to meet her. When you reach her, she nudges your shoulder with the braced wooden yoke she carries. 2 empty buckets hang from it, swinging slightly. You took your time, she mutters, but there's no bite in it. Here, she says, and shifts the yoke and slides it across her shoulders. The weight settles into the muscles of your neck and back in a way that is as known to you as your own hands. The lane is damp where the night's dew has not yet burned off. As you walk toward the well, the village is waking around you. Brid's door swings open, and the old woman emerges, hair gray cloud around her head, clucking at the brood of hens that spill past her skirts. The twins, Con and Calm, race from their cottage, chasing each other with sticks that are swords, or staffs, or spears, depending on the story in their heads. All of them are yours, in the way that people in a place like this are never just themselves. Con is also Bridge's grandson, and the boy who broke your only good spoon last winter when he tripped and fell in your kitchen. Riona is not only your sister, but the girl who once pulled Mora's baby back from the riverbank when he toddled too near. Everyone here is held in the same net of stories. you included. The stone well stands in the broadest part of the lane, ringed with packed earth. Its lip is worn satin smooth from centuries of hands and buckets. The wooden frame about it creaks softly as a breeze shifts the hanging rope. As you approach, you lay one hand on the stones in greeting, as your grandmother taught you. Not a superstition, she always said with a sharp glance toward the chapel, but courtesy. You would not walk into a neighbor's cottage without a nod. So why would you draw water from a neighbor's stone without the same? The chill of the rock seeps into your palm. Beneath it, faint as a heartbeat muffled through wool, you imagine you can feel the slightest thrum of the water below. Morning, you murmur, to the stone, to the water, to whoever listens. Riona hears, and you can feel her smile without looking. You lower the bucket hand over hand, the rope rough against your fingers, listening for the hollow slap and gurgle as it meets the water. Then the pull, the weight changing, the strain in your shoulders as you lift. Routine, yes, but the routines of this life are what make its edges safe. As you and Riona fill your buckets and turn back up the lane, your breath puffing white in the cooling air, you are only dimly aware of the currents tugging farther out, of the English lords arguing over lands, of plague and war and shifting kings. Those things are stories that ride in on the backs of peddlers and traveling friars, wild and far away. Your world is here. You don't yet know how those wide unseen currents will one day break against your tiny village, or how much will be asked of you to keep that warm cluster of lives from being torn apart. For now you only know that the yoke across your shoulders is heavy, the bucket's full, and your sister is arguing cheerfully about whether the oatcakes will be burnt. You listen, you laugh, you walk home. You are still yourself, but not yet fully the self you will become. The first omen comes 3 weeks later, at dusk. You are helping your father patch the thatch above the sleeping loft. Your fingers numb and prickled with hay itch when the wind shifts. One moment, it blows brisk and cool from the river, carrying the smell of mud and reeds. The next, it falls utterly still, like a breath held too long. The loose ends of straw around you sag. Smoke from the chimneys, which had been streaming away to the west, rises straight up into the thickening blue, then fans out and hangs there, unmoving. Your father's hand stills on the thatch. Do you feel that? He asks. You do. It is not that the air is colder or warmer. It is that something in it has turned its attention, as if the whole sky were listening. A dog somewhere down the lane gives a questioning bark and then goes quiet. The last bird calls from the hedges cut off one by one. For a heartbeat, your small village lies under a dome of absolute ringing silence. Then the wind comes again, from a different direction. It flows down off the north hills and through the village like a long, slow sigh, brushing your cheek with a faint, unfamiliar scent. You think of distant heather, of old stone, of something sharp as iron and sweet as apples left too long in a cold room. Your father pulls in a breath through his teeth. His face is turned toward the wind, his dark hair lifting slightly in it. Your grandmother will have words about this, he mutters. You climb down the ladder, following him. Inside, the cottage is a small, glowing world of its own. Firelight on the rough walls, the smell of stewing barley with onions and a precious scrap of mutton, the scratch of your mother's knitting needles. Your younger brother Connor sits by the hearth with his legs crossed, carefully whittling a small wooden horse. Your grandmother Nuala occupies her carved chair like a queen enthroned, shawl wrapped around her narrow shoulders, eyes clear and watching. She looks up as your father ducks through the low doorway, you right behind him. You felt it, she says, not a question. He nods once. From the north, off the hills. Too warm for the hour. She nods slowly, a muscle in her jaw tightening. And the stillness before it, like the whole village had a hand over its mouth, you blurt, before you can stop yourself. Nuala's gaze flicks to you and softens. Aye, she says, just so. Your mother sets her work down. Will you tell us plain what you're thinking, Moan? She asks, in that steady voice she uses when she is ready to be frightened but not to be panicked. No riddles? Nuala smiles faintly. I've no wish to hoard riddles, Mare, but the land doesn't always speak plain. It hums and hints. You know that. When I was a girl, my father would say that a still wind from the north at dusk meant the old paths were stirring, that something in the bones of the place was shifting. She taps the floor with a gnarled knuckle. Last time it blew like that, the signs were small for months, and then half the cattle in the next valley sickened. Connor's carving stills. Riona, at the table kneading dough, glances up sharply. Sickness? Your mother repeats, her fingers tightening on her knitting. Like the plague they talk about in the East. The Black Death? We saw little of that sickness here, your father says quickly, laying a hand on her arm. The stories came, but they passed us by. Different sicknesses wear different faces, Nuala says quietly. Then people began to look at one another with that same hunger in their eyes, and the place itself seemed to draw in on itself like a snail in its shell. They called it the leaning year, because everything and everyone seemed to be leaning towards some edge they couldn't see. And what stopped it, you ask? The question pulled from you as if on a string. Newell smiles, thin and wry. We did, she says, not with herbs or prayers alone, but with how we held together. Your grandfather, God rest him, remembered that when a place starts to sicken, sometimes it's not only the soil or the water. Sometimes it's the way the people have stopped seeing each other. She shifts in her chair. But that's a story with many turns, and you've no patience for it when your stomach's empty. Tell it anyway, Connor says, eyes bright. Please, Nuala. Before supper, your mother shoots him an indulgent look. We'll all listen better with something in us, she says. Let's eat first, and then you can fill our heads with tales. You sit down to stew and bread, the familiar movements of passing bowls and tearing crusts offering their own kind of comfort. The odd wind has passed, but it has left a shadow in the air, like the taste of smoke long after a fire is out. As your grandmother talks later, after the eating is done, and the younger children have begun to slouch with sleep, you listen more closely than you ever have. She tells of that old year of leanness, of a trader arriving with stories of famine in distant towns, of a spring that came late and half-hearted, of a summer that burned the fields brown, of sharp words in the lane and sharper hoarding of what little there was, of her own father who one evening climbed up on the well-stone and shouted until the whole village gathered, then made each of them speak a gratitude aloud, as if they were drawing water from some well inside themselves. It didn't make the rains come, she says, voice low and steady. It didn't fill the cow's udders in a night. But it changed something. The air got lighter. Folk shared more. The place itself seemed to breathe easier. And the worst of it passed us by. You watched the firelight shape and reshape the planes of her face. She looks suddenly not so old, not ageless either, but like someone whose years have burned away everything but the bright, hard core. What are you saying, Nuala? Riona asks finally. That we're in for another year like that, just because of a wind? I'm saying, Nuala replies, that the land has ways of warning us, if we'll listen. That wind was a hand at the back of my neck. It says, pay attention, something's coming. What shape it'll take, I can't say. Maybe sickness, maybe raiders, maybe oaths broken afar that'll crack the ground under our feet in time. But whatever it is, we'll face it better if we remember now what held us last time. She looks at you then, and you feel a strange shiver run through you. Not fear exactly, not excitement exactly, something like standing at the top of a steep hill, looking down, knowing you will have to walk it. You hear this place more keenly than most, she says. You always have. When you were a baby, you'd turn your head toward the well whenever someone spoke near it. When you were a child, you knew the weather was turning before the crows did. When the air hums, you hum with it. Her mouth quirks. I have a feeling we'll be needing those ears of yours. You swallow. You've never thought of yourself as anything in particular. You are not as quick with numbers as your mother, nor as strong as your father, nor as deft with herbs and stories as Nuala, nor as brave as Riona, nor as fearless as Connor. You are simply you, a scrap of a person in a scrap of a village. And yet, you cannot deny what she says. You do feel things sometimes, just a moment before others. You notice the way the hens go quiet when the sky darkens. You feel the well's cool gaze through your hand. You know when the lane is carrying anger even before you hear raised voices. The idea that this might matter, that you might matter, is a stone in your palm, heavy, unsettling, and strangely precious. What do I have to do? You ask, before you quite mean to. Your father makes a small sound, part protest, part pride. Your mother's needles stop. Nuala smiles, slow and satisfied, as if you have stepped exactly where she hoped you would. First, she says, you have to sleep. You won't hear anything with ears full of yawns. Tomorrow, if the wind holds quiet, we begin with something simple. Simple, you echo warily. We'll go to the well, she says, and listen. Properly this time. Not just long enough to pull a bucket. The next day dawns gray and wet, the clouds low and heavy with rain. The world smells of damp wall and churned mud. You walk with Nuala to the well after the morning's chores, your boots squelching slightly with every step. She leans on her walking stick as if it were an extra limb, her shawl pulled up over her head against the drizzle. The well is quieter at this hour. Most of the morning water has been drawn. The rush is over. A few women still come and go, nodding to Nuala with respect and curiosity. No one intrudes. Put your hand on the stones, Nuala says once you're alone, and hush that clatter in your head. I'm not thinking anything, you protest. That's the loudest sort of thinking there is, she says dryly, the kind you pretend isn't happening. Breathe, feel, don't make shapes of it yet. Just notice. You obey because you have always found it easier to do what Nuala says than what most other people say. You rest your palm against the cool, damp surface of the well stones. You let your weight lean into it, feeling the roughness under your skin, the slightest grit. At first, all you're aware of is the rain, pattering on your hood and the brim of Nuala's shawl, the faint itch of damp wool on your neck, the distant clank of a hammer, Riona's laughter somewhere up the lane as she shares a joke with a neighbor. Then, slowly, something subtler. There is a quiet there, beneath the familiar noise. Not an emptiness, but a fullness that doesn't need to shout, like the stillness of a person listening. You feel the water's weight below your hand, the cool column of it in the dark, pressing against the stones, holding and being held. You feel the slight tremble when a drop of rain works its way through the cracks and joins the larger body. You feel, or imagine you feel, the memory of all the buckets that have been lowered and raised here, the echoes of hands, lives, thirsts. Do you feel it? Nuala murmurs, close beside you. Yes, you whisper. It's awake. She nods, pleased. Good. Now, here's the thing. When the land or the water or the stones are uneasy, you can feel that too. A sourness, a quiver, like a note that doesn't sit right in a tune. The wind last night was one such note. The well, now, is another thing to watch. The hedges, the beasts. They'll tell us if what's coming is only a gust or a storm. Storms we can weather, you say, almost to yourself. Storms we can weather, she agrees, if we hold together. You pull your hand back at last. The stones feel just like stones again. But the awareness lingers, like the impression of bright light after you close your eyes. As the days pass, you find yourself returning to the well whenever you can, resting your hand on it for a moment before drawing water, checking its quiet. You watch the hedges, the way the small birds move through them, the health of their leaves. You listen to the animals breathing, the weight of their gazes. The wind from the north does not blow again quite like that first evening, but the sense of waiting does not fade. Then, the hardship arrives. Not in a sweeping calamity that flattens your village overnight, but in a series of blows that land where you are most tender. The first is the loss of your fields. It starts with rain. At first, the village welcomes it. The early spring has been dry, the earth cracked where it should be soft. When the clouds finally tear open and spill, you and Connor spin in the lane, with your faces upturned, mouths open to catch the drops. Your mother laughs and chides you back under the eaves, but her eyes shine with relief. But the rain doesn't stop. For days, it falls in a steady, soaking sheet. The fields turn from hard, cracked brown to soup. Paths become rivulets. The river swells, creeping up its banks, gnawing away at the edges of the fields closest to its reach. You watch grasses and newly sprouted barley disappear under water. You feel the worry in the lane thicken like porridge left too long on the fire. Once it dries, we can sow again, your father says, more to reassure himself than you, as he stands calf-deep in muddy water where a week ago he had walked a firm, promising field. It'll make the soil rich. We've seen wet springs before, but the rain doesn't let up enough to let anything be sown. The second blow comes from the south, on 4 legs. The squire who claims these lands, an Anglo-Norman whose people arrived generations ago with swords and stayed with ink and seals, sends men to the village with a new decree. The harvest, when it comes, will owe a greater share to his storehouses. Too many poor years elsewhere, he claims. His own supplies are thin. What harvest? Moel demands in the lane, fists clenched, when the men ride away. Does he plan to drown us and then demand the fish? Mind your tongue, your mother hisses. He has ears everywhere. Let him hear, Moel growls. Maybe he'll hear the sucking of the mud where his bread should grow. You feel something inside you twist, a mix of anger and helplessness. Rain, demands, mud, empty barns. The village is not yet desperate. There are still stores from the previous year. A few pigs to be slaughtered if it comes to that. A cow or two heavy with calf. But the path ahead has narrowed sharply. There is very little room for misstep. The third blow finds your family directly. It is a morning like any other, gray, chill, smelling of smoke and wet wool, when your father does not rise. You wake to your mother's soft, urgent voice and the rustle of blankets. Your own eyes blink open blearily to see her leaning over the pallet your parents share, one hand on your father's shoulder. "Sean," she whispers. "Come now, you missed the milking." "Sean." He does not move. You sit up, the fog of sleep dropping away at once. Your father lies on his side, his face turned slightly toward the wall. His brow is furrowed, his lips parted as if he's halfway through a word. His chest rises and falls, but shallowly, as if each breath has a stone on it. Your mother shakes his shoulder harder. "Sean," she repeats, fear in the thinness of his name. He stirs then, but not as he should. His eyes flutter open, but they do not quite seem to see. His right hand twitches, fingers curling and uncurling like a baby's. When he tries to push himself up, only one side of his body answers. A thick dread pools in your stomach. You whisper, "Can you hear us?" His gaze slides toward you, then away. His mouth moves, a sound emerges, but it is not a word. More fumbling, a jumble of syllables that never quite land. "Fetch, Nuala," your mother snaps to Riona, her voice shaking now. "And Father O'Rourke, and Moel too, if he's up. Go." Riona goes, skirts flying, bare feet slapping the packed earth. You move without needing to be told. You stoke the fire, set water to warm. You help your mother shift your father's limp weight carefully, straightening his legs, tucking a blanket more firmly around him when his body shivers. The right side of his face looks strange, as if it has forgotten how to be his. Nuala arrives first, breathless and pale, leaning harder on her stick than you have ever seen. Her hands, though, are steady, as she lays them on your father's chest, his brow, his wrists. "It's a stroke," she says quietly, after a long moment. "A what?" your mother demands. Something in the blood broke loose up here. Nuala taps her own temple. Stop the flow along one side. It happens. I've seen it before. Sometimes it takes a body within hours. Sometimes it leaves them half here and half not, for years. Her voice softens. Sometimes they find their way back, part way or more. But he'll not be to the fields this week, or the next, maybe never. The words fall into the cottage like stones. Your mother's shoulders hunch as if someone has placed a weight on them. Connor, who has been hovering near the hearth with wide eyes, lets out a small, choked sound. Riona, standing in the doorway with Father O'Rourke just behind her, makes a strangled noise and bites it back. You look at your father, at the man who taught you how to sling the yoke across your shoulders, who lifted you to see over the hedge when the fox cubs appeared, who sat silent but firm at the table when talk of taxes grew heated, and you feel betrayed almost by the sight of him so undone. He'll know us, though, you ask, desperate to find something solid. He'll still be? Nuala's eyes soften. Oh, he's here, she says. You can see it, hear it in the way he's trying to find his tongue. But it'll take time for his path back to himself to be clear. She looks at you, at Riona, at Connor. You'll have to be his hands and feet in the world for a while, and his patience when his own runs thin. You swallow hard. You are not sure how to be anyone's hands and feet. Your own feel unsteady under you. Father O'Rourke steps forward, rosary in hand, murmuring a blessing as he kneels by the bed. Your mother, caught between faith and fear, grips her apron in both fists and bows her head. You stand back, pressed against the wall, feeling the world tilt. Rain. Fields spoiled. Taxes raised. Your father felled. This is more than a gust. This is a storm, pulling at the corners of your family, your village, your life. And yet, in the middle of the fear, a little voice in you whispers, you felt this coming. The land warned you. The well listened. You are not taken by surprise, not completely. It is a thin comfort, but it is there. In the weeks that follow, your family learns a new shape. Your father does not die. This, in itself, feels like a small miracle. There are nights when he is so still, your mother lays her hand on his chest, fingers trembling, to make sure it still rises. There are mornings when his skin feels too hot, when sweat beads on his upper lip, and his eyes dart restlessly. But slowly the fever breaks. His breathing steadies. The wild look in his gaze cools, leaving confusion but also recognition. He still cannot speak more than a word or two at a time. His right arm and leg remain heavy, uncooperative. But his left hand grows surer each day. He uses it to grip your mother's fingers, to smooth your hair, to reach stubbornly for the cup when he is thirsty. You help with that cup, with the pot, with the small, awkward tasks of washing and turning and propping. You and Riona trade the yoke more often now, shoulders aching with double loads. Connor learns to milk the cow earlier than most boys would, his narrow hands gentle and determined. Your mother refuses to yield to despair. She measures the grain more carefully. She rewrites who does which chores. The strain shows in the lines etched more sharply around her eyes, in the way she stares for too long at the damp field through the window. But she keeps moving, one foot, then the other. Your grandmother watches, advises, fills the house with quietly fierce stories of people who were knocked down and found new ways to stand, of widows who turned their grief into stubborn, joyful work, of men who lost an arm and gained a craft that relied only on the other. At night, when the fire has burned low and the village has sunk into its soft, shared sleep, you lie awake sometimes, listening to your father's uneven breathing and the distant rush of the swollen river. You feel the weight of things on your chest. You also feel something else, a growing fiber in you, like a rope being braided. It itches. It pulls. It whispers that you are not a child who can simply be carried anymore. You are part of what holds this small world together now. You do not know how to be that yet, but you begin. You start by listening, not just to the well, though you still lay your hand on its stones whenever you passed, not just to the wind, though you note each time it shifts direction or temperature oddly. You listen to the way people's voices sound in the lane. You listen to where laughter appears and where it has been absent too long. You listen to who steps forward when help is needed and who hangs back, shamefaced but paralyzed. You begin to notice threads. There is Mora, whose husband died last year, leaving her with 3 small children and a patch of rocky ground. She does not complain, but you see the way she tightens her jaw when the talk turns to next winter. There's Tomas, quick with his hands and quicker with his temper, who masks his own fear with jokes too sharp. There's Bran, who has more land than most because he inherited from an uncle, but whose back has never quite healed from a fall. He walks like a man twice his age. You file these things away without meaning to. Your mind becomes a small, careful ledger of strengths and needs. One morning, when the rain has finally lessened to a steady mist and the ground has churned itself into a thick, grutting mud, Nuala finds you by the door, pulling on your boots. "Where away?" she asks. You shrug, a little embarrassed to say. "Nowhere," you answer, "just walking." She gives you a long look that sees straight through the half-truth. "Walk by the well then," she says, "and walk by Mora's and Bran's. And notice which chimneys smoke less, and which doorsteps look worn thinner. Your walking can be a listening too." You nod. The word listening is taking up more and more space in your life. It is not a passive thing you are slowly understanding. It is not just letting sounds pass through your ears. It is attending, weighing, letting what you observe change you, even a little. You walk. The village unfolds under your feet in all its ordinary, extraordinary detail. Slate-gray puddles reflecting a sky the same color, hens scratching at the drier edges of yards, children bundled in cloaks, their noses pink with cold, playing with sticks and old bits of rope. The air smells of damp peat and wool, and the faint, sour tang of turnip peelings. Outside Mora's cottage, the woodpile's lower than it should be for this time of year. The step looks clean, almost too clean, as if she has scrubbed it more to have something to do with her hands than from any real need. You hear no laughter from inside. You knock. She opens the door with the baby on her hip, and a carefully arranged expression. "Well then," she says, forcing brightness, "come in, or the damp will sneak in around your heels." You step into the narrow warmth and make some harmless comment about the weather. You play with the middle child's wooden toy for a minute. You let your eyes flick, just once, to the nearly empty grain barrel in the corner. Mora sees the direction of your gaze and sets her jaw. "We'll manage," she says. "We always do." You believe her. You also know that managing alone can slowly hollow a person out. "We're baking today," you say. "Men wants to send a loaf to Moal's wife. Her leg's not healed right yet. I thought we could make 2 instead, and you could help, since your bread always rises higher than ours." It is clumsy. Obvious. You feel your cheeks heat, but Mora's shoulders ease a fraction. "Oh, does it now?" she says, with the ghost of a real smile. "Well, if your mam's finally admitting that, it'd be a shame to waste the chance to show off." Later, when she comes to your cottage with her sleeves rolled and her hair in a kerchief, your mother pretends to protest at being instructed in her own kitchen. They mock argue over kneading times and oven heat, but you catch the look they share over the dough. Gratitude, not asked for aloud, but given and received. You have started a small thing, a loaf, a shared morning, a bit of air let into someone's tight chest. It is not enough to change the rain or the taxes or your father's faltering speech, but it is something. You keep doing it. You convince Tomas to help Bran repair his fence, couching it in the language of Bran will owe you one, rather than Bran needs you. You ask Connor to trade a morning's play to fetch water for old Brid, who pretends not to be touched but leaves an extra egg on your doorstep the next day. You nudge Riona to show Moel's apprentice a quicker way of plowing that your father taught you years ago and you've been hoarding in your memory. Each of these is a tiny act, a stitch in a cloth that is larger than you. Many days your work feels invisible. The rain still falls, the taxes are still owed. Your father's right hand still hangs heavy more often than it moves. But slowly you sense something in the village shifting. The lane feels less taut, less full of brittle silence. People are still afraid, but they are afraid together, not alone. On a day when the rain finally breaks and the sun pushes weakly through the clouds, you stand again on the slope above the village. You see the same small cluster of cottages, the same plume of smoke. You see the same swollen river, the same muddied field. You see children's figures darting in the lane, women's skirts, men's backs bent over tools and beasts. And you see, somehow, the threads that run between them all, threads you have watched, touched, strengthened. You put your hand on your own heart, feeling its beat. You imagine for a moment that you can feel the village's heartbeat too, pulsing under the thin, wet skin of the world. You almost don't hear Riona at first when she calls your name from below, her voice edged with something that is not quite panic, not quite excitement. You turn. She is standing in the lane, one hand shading her eyes as she looks up. "Come down," she calls. "There's a rider on the south road. Goss says it's the squire's man, or one of 'em anyway. And he's not alone." Your stomach tightens. The last time the squire's men came, they brought words, decrees. The memory of their high-strung horses and their polished boots, and the way their eyes slid over your people like they were counting livestock still makes your teeth clench. If they're back, and not alone. You hurry down the hill. The riders bring trouble with them, as you knew they would. There are 3 of them this time, cloaks slick with road mud, horses steaming faintly in the cool air. The man in front bears the squire's colors on his sleeve. The other 2 wear plainer gear, but their posture is that of men used to being obeyed. They rein in at the center of the village, near the well, hooves kicking up clods of wet earth. People gather in a cautious ring around them, not daring to come too close, not brave enough or foolish enough to stay inside and pretend they did not see. Your father sits in Nua's old chair near your cottage door, watching with his good eye. His mouth is set. His right hand rests motionless on his knee. His left clenches the chair's arm. The leader of the riders, a narrow-faced man with a neat beard, scans the villagers with practiced indifference. "Sean McCohen," he calls. His Irish is stiff, like a cloak that doesn't fit. Your father makes a sound in his throat, something like "here," but it comes out slurred. Your mother steps forward, chin lifted. "My husband is there," she says, pointing. "What business have you with him?" The rider looks at your father, taking in the drooping side of his face, the stillness of his right limbs. His lip curls almost imperceptibly. "The squire sent word in the spring," he says, "that every holding in this valley owes a greater share of its harvest to be paid in grain or in coin. That word was delivered here." He glances around. You all heard it. A low murmur. No one denies it. "And yet," the man continues, "we see little sign of preparation. The squire is not blind to the rain. He is not an unreasonable man. But his own stores are low. His men must eat. His obligations must be met." He fixes his gaze on your mother again. "Your holding is not the poorest in this village. You have cattle. You have a sound roof. You owe your share." "We know what we owe," your mother says. "We've paid it every year. But you can't squeeze bread from waterlogged earth. Half our fields are drowned. My husband has taken ill. We will give what we can, but if we give what you ask, we'll face winter with nothing but prayer and bark to chew." A few people mutter assent. A distant cow lows, as if adding its own complaint. The rider's eyes harden. "If you cannot pay in grain," he says, "there are other ways." He gestures to one of the men behind him. Accounts. The second man, his expression bored, pulls a folded parchment from his cloak. "Let's see," he mutters, running a finger down the inked lines. "Sean McCohen, 2 fields, 1 cow, one heifer, a pig, 4 hens, 3 children, 1 old woman, 1, he squints, 2 daughters. 3, you say, before you can stop yourself. He lifts his head, surprised. 3 what? 3 children, you say, heat creeping up your neck. Connor, me, Riona, and my grandmother. That makes 4 grown and 2 not. You said 3. The ink man smirks. Then, the scribe made an error, he says, easily fixed. It changes nothing. His gaze flicks over you, then away, as if you are a piece of furniture that has spoken. The leader clears his throat. Your duty stands, he says to your mother. You will give what grain you have to spare, and your eldest son will come to the squire's hall after harvest to work off the rest of your debt. A week of service. 2, perhaps. We'll see. A coil of dread drops in your stomach. Eldest son. All eyes slide to Connor, who inhales sharply and takes a step back, fingers curling at his sides. He's 12, your mother says, voice tight. He's no more ready for that than the calf is for the yoke. He's big enough to carry a pail, her writer says. Big enough to carry a spear in a few years. Men younger than him have gone before. The squire's not unreasonable. He doesn't take them far for long. He has fences to mend, cellars to fill, a new ditch to be dug. There will be food, a bed, coin to send home. Your mother's hand trembles on her apron. My son's place is here this year, she insists. You can see the state of my husband. I have 2 daughters, but it would be, she swallows, it would not be fitting to send them to serve in a hall of men and strangers. Connor is needed, and he is still a child. The writer's gaze sweeps the crowd again, cool. Need does not erase duty, he says. Think carefully before you refuse the squire's generosity in offering work instead of punishment. Punishment. The word lands like an unseen blow. You hear Bridge mutter a prayer under her breath. You feel the whole village tighten. You think of Connor carrying water until his arms shake, of your father struggling to lift his own head, of your mother's scrubbed thin hands. You think of the rain, the mud, the emptying stores. Something in you, a thread that has been quietly twining since the night of the strange wind, snaps taut. You step forward. Take me instead, you hear yourself say. The lane goes very still. The ratter turns his head slowly, as if he cannot believe the source of the sound. You? He says. You're barely more than a child yourself, girl. I can carry a pail, you say, keeping your voice as even as you can. I can bake and mend and keep accounts in my head. I can lift, if not as much as Connor, then enough. And I'm not needed in the fields as he is. He's stronger. He can do the work of 2 men there. I can do the work of 1 here and of 1 at your squire's. Send me. Your mother's hand flies to her mouth. No, she says through her fingers. No, you'll not. Mom, you say, turning to her, heart hammering. If Connor goes, who mends the fences? Who helps Moel with the plow? Who lifts Da when you're too tired? I can do that work, but not all of it. Connor can. And if I go to the hall, maybe I can hear things, bring something back. Know what they plan? It's only a week, or 2. You swallow. We can manage that, can't we? Your father, in his chair, makes a sound, a raw, frustrated syllable that might once have been your name. His left hand grips the arm of the chair until his knuckles whiten. You meet his gaze. I can do this, you tell him, softly but firmly. Let me. You can almost hear your grandmother's whisper in the back of your mind. The land has ways of warning us. You have ways of answering. The writer studies you. There is no kindness in his expression, but there is calculation. A girl in a lord's hall is not without risk, but neither is a half-grown boy too scrawny yet for full field work. And perhaps, to his mind, a girl will be less trouble. Can you read? He asks abruptly. You blink, startled. Some, you say. Letters. Numbers. enough to keep tally for Moel in the lean months when he forgets. Father O'Rourke has taught you in slow, patient bits over the years, indulging your curiosity because you asked, even when others grumbled that too much ink in the head made a girl think above her place. The writer nods once. The squire's steward may find use for that. Very well. He raises his voice as if making a pronouncement in a court. Instead of the boy, the girl will present herself to the hall at week's end, with what grain you can spare as token of your goodwill. She will serve for a fortnight. If she proves idle or disobedient, the squire reserves the right to send for the boy as well. His gaze sweeps the villagers again. This is a mercy. See that you remember it. He jerks his reins. The horses snort, hooves splashing mud. As they ride away, your mother turns on you, her eyes frantic. What have you done? She demands, voice cracking. Offer yourself to them like that. Do you know what could... I know, you say, more sharply than you intend. I know what could happen if Connor goes, if we lose him from the fields even for a week. I know what happens if we refuse anything at all. I'm not a child, ma'am. Your throat tightens. Not anymore. Your father makes another broken sound, a protest, a plea, a curse. You cannot tell. His eyes shine with tears he will not let fall. You go to him, kneel by his chair, take his good hand in both of yours. I'll come back, you say, fiercely. It's only a fortnight. We've survived worse. You taught me that, Daw. He blinks hard, then nods just once. Riona is very still beside you. When you glance at her, her mouth is pressed tight. Anger, fear, pride all war in her gaze. I should go, she says finally, voice low. We need you here, you answer. Ma'am needs you here. And I need you out there, she replies. Bring those sharp ears of yours, sister. Listen well. Come back and tell me everything. The days leading up to your departure are a blur of work and worry and hurried tenderness. You help your mother parcel out the dwindling stores, setting aside a small sack of grain for the squire, as if you aren't sure whether you want every kernel short to sting him or every kernel full to convince him you are good for more. You mend your only decent dress. You sit with your father in the evenings, letting his left hand cradle yours while his eyes roam your face as if trying to memorize it. Connor vacillates between guilt and envy and fear, coming to you at odd times to blurt, "If they're cruel, shout loud. I'll hear you," as if his ears span miles. Or, "Bring me back a story, or a stone, something from there, so it feels less like a tale and more like a place." Rihanna braids your hair tighter on the last morning, fingers swift and a little rough. "Hold your head up when you go in," she instructs. "They live off our backs, those men. Don't give them your pride too." "I'm not going to spit at them, Rihanna," you mutter. "I didn't say you should," she retorts. "I said don't let them make you smaller in your own mind. You're our own, remember that." Eula presses something into your hand as you stand by the door, readying to leave. A small, worn token, carved from wood into a simple knotwork circle. "For a remembering," she says. "Not magic, not a charm that'll turn blows aside. Just a thing from here to carry there, and something for your fingers to hold when your head gets loud." You close your fingers around it. The edges fit your palm as if they've always lived there. Your mother kisses your forehead, her lips lingering. "Be clever," she whispers. "Be careful. Be kind to those who deserve it and hard as oak with those who don't. And come home." You nod, 'cause your tongue has nodded. Then you set your shoulders, take the small sack of grain, and begin walking down the road to the south. You have never gone so far alone. The lane narrows, the cottages thinning behind you. The sound of the village fades, voices, dogs, the ring of Moel's hammer, replaced by bird song and the squelch of your boots. The fields give way to wilder ground, hedge and gorse, the occasional twisted tree. The sky is a dull pewter, but a thin light pierces through. You think of the well, of the way it felt under your hand, You think of Nuala's stories of the leaning year. You think of your own listening. The squire's hall rises ahead, gray and hard against the land. It is not a castle, not in the big grand way the traveling friars describe, the ones with towers and murder holes and banners you can see for miles. It is a fortified manor, 2 stories of stone, with a wooden palisade around a small yard. A few outbuildings cluster around it, a stable, a granary, a low smithy. Smoke threads from its chimney, the smell of roasting meat faint on the air. You pause, just before the gate. Your heart thumps. Your palms sweat against the sack. You touch the wooden token in your pocket, feeling the carved knot under your fingers. I am from somewhere, you tell yourself, silently. I belong to someone. I know things they don't. I carry my family with me. Then you step forward. The guard at the gate looks you up and down with a bored expression. You're the one from the village? He asks, English coloring his Irish. Yes, you say, keeping your voice level. I brought the grain, hefts it appraisingly, then jerks his head toward the yard. Steward's inside, he says. Ask for Master Full. And do as you're told, girl, if you want to go home with your hide whole. You nod, because there is nothing to be gained by arguing with a man whose hand rests on a spear for a living. Inside the yard, everything feels larger and smaller at once. Larger, because the walls loom. The horses are bigger than any you have seen up close. The men's voices are louder, their clothes of finer cloth. Smaller, because the space itself is crowded, contained, the great house shouldering out the sky, the yard hemmed in by wood and stone. Your village, for all its modesty, breathes. This place holds its breath. You find the steward, Master Folk, in a small chamber just off the hall. He is a thin man in his middle years, ink-stained fingers, a sharp nose, hair going gray at the temples. His desk is piled with parchment and small bags of something that clink faintly when he moves them. He looks up when you knock on the door frame. Yes, he says, impatience already in the word. You stand up a little straighter. I'm from the village north, you say, Sean McCohen's family. I've brought the grain he could spare, and I'm here to work off the west, as the squire ordered. He squints at you, then reaches for a rolled parchment and scans it quickly. Yes, he grimaces. The sick farmer. Very well. His gaze travels over you, your patched dress, your braided hair, your sturdy boots. You say you can read a little? Yes, master. We'll test that later. For now the hall needs scrubbing and the kitchen needs another pair of hands. He gestures curtly. Find cook, do what she says. Don't steal, don't break anything. Don't speak unless spoken to, unless it's to ask how to do a task. If I find you idle, I'll give you to stable master John, and he has less patience than I do, and a longer arm. His mouth twitches. If you work well, we may even send you home when we said we would. Understand? Yes. You say again, though in your head you translate his words into plainer language. Learn quickly, work hard, watch everything. You find cook, a large woman with arms like ham hocks, and a voice that could cut through stone, at the hearth in the great hall below. She puts you to work at once, fetching water, scrubbing pots, chopping vegetables. It is hard, repetitive labor, but you know it. It is not so different from what you do at home, just with more of it. As you work, you listen. You listen to the women gossiping as their hands knead dough and peel onions. You listen to the servants mutter about the squire's temper, about his wife's illness, about the steward's hard-handedness. You listen to the grumble of the guards about extra patrols, about rumors of unrest farther south. You listen to the squire's own voice, drifting down from the upper level of the hall when he meets with Master Fulk, clipped, worried, angry about shortages, about obligations to his own overlords, about the king's endless need for men and money. You tuck away the names of places, the shapes of problems. You think of your village, your family, fitting inside these bigger, harsher patterns. At night, you curl up in a pallet in a side room with 3 other girls. They sleep quickly, their breaths soft and even. You lie awake for a while, fingers curled around Nula's token, tracing its edges. You miss the sound of your father's uneven breathing. You miss the crooked line of smoke from your cottage roof. You miss the wellstone under your hand, yet you remind yourself this is a thread too. You are tied to home by it, not cut off. You are here to weave something useful if you can. On the third day, Master Folk tests your reading. He sets a parchment in front of you with a short list of stores written in a clear, if somewhat stiff, hand. Barley, oats, smoked fish, salt, lamp oil. Read, he says. You sound out the words, halting at first, then more sure. He grunts, half impressed. You were not lying, he says. Good. The squire's chaplain is ill. Someone must help me keep tally on market day. You can make marks too? A few, you say. Father O'Rourke taught me. You hesitate, then add. I keep account for Moel sometimes, when his head is too full of mails and horseshoes. The steward's mouth quirks. Blacksmiths, he mutters, always losing numbers into the fire. Very well, you'll come to the market table with me tomorrow. Keep your eyes open and your tongue still. You go. You watch farmers from farther valleys bring in their meager offerings. You see the squire's men take more than seems fair from some, less from others. You see Master Folk weigh and measure and count, his ink-stained fingers quick. You see coins change hands, promises made. You add up tallies in your head. By the end of the day, you know something that makes your jaw clench. Your village is not the worst off. Far from it. There are places where the rain has washed whole fields down the hill, where disease has taken not just one farmer, but 3 from a single household. There are places where the squire will not get what he demands, no matter how he snarls or threatens. He is worried, you realize, not just greedy, not just cruel, worried. This does not excuse what he takes from you, but it gives you a lever. A small one, perhaps, but a lever all the same. That night, in your pallet, you lie awake longer than usual, mind turning. You think of Nuala's story, of how her father gathered the village to speak gratitude aloud, not because it would change the weather, but because it would change them. You think of how you have begun to do the same in your own small ways. What if you could do something similar here? Not with gratitude, with truth. The squire sits in his hall, fretting over numbers, over obligations to men who have never seen your valley. The steward stacks parchments and moves bags of grain like pieces on a board. They see only tallies, not lives, not the way fear moves through a village, hollowing it. You have seen those things. For the first time since you arrived, an idea stirs in you that is not just about surviving these 2 weeks, but about using them. You are only one small person in a small place for a short time. But then again, you have seen what small things can do. On the 7th day of your service, the squire holds a council in the great hall. You know because cook mutters about it while she slaps dough into shape, and because the steward is more short-tempered than usual, snapping at anyone who misplaces so much as a spoon. They'll sit up there spilling words, cook grumbles, jabbing a thumb toward the raised end of the hall, while we spill sweat keeping their bellies from rumbling. You, girl, bring that stew over to the sideboard and then be ready with the bread. You obey, carrying the heavy pot with careful steps. As you move through the hall, you catch snatches of conversation. If we do not send them grain, they will send men, one voice says, sharp, anxious. Already restless in the south, another adds. They say a band of dispossessed men has taken to the woods, raiding carts. If they catch wind of weakness here, cannot starve my own folk to feed men in Dublin, the squire snaps. But the levies, you keep your eyes down, as you've been taught, but your ears are very much up. Later, when the council has eaten, and the hall has emptied to a low murmur, you are called to carry up a tray of ale. You do as you're told, gripping the tray's handles so tightly your fingers ache. As you approach the high table, the squire looks up. He is not a monstrous man. He is not especially tall, nor broad, nor ugly. He is simply a tired man in his middle years with a good wool cloak, a gold ring, and the power to make your life difficult. His eyes rest on you a moment longer than politeness requires. You're the village girl, he says. Yes, my lord, you say, bowing your head. How are the fields there? He asks. His tone is almost careless, as if the question is a pebble tossed in passing. You feel suddenly that you stand on one of Nula's old crossroads, not of paths through the forest, but of choices. You can lie, say the fields are as good as they can be, that your people will meet his quotas, that he need not worry. It would be the safer answer, in the moment. It would also be useless. You can fling the full truth at him like a stone, that the fields are drowning, that your father is half paralyzed, that his taxes will starve you. It would be brave. It would also very possibly earn you a beating or worse. Or you can do something in between. You take a breath. They are wet, my lord, you say, carefully. Wetter than they should be. We have lost half our planting to the river. But we are not alone. The farmers who came to market from the South Valley spoke of land sliding away, of seed rotting. Those from the east of late frosts and blight on the early shoots. Master Folk makes a small warning sound under his breath, but the squire lifts a hand, silencing him. You listen when you work, do you? He says, one eyebrow raised. Yes, my lord, you answer. It keeps the mind from wandering. A few of the men around the table chuckle softly. The squire's mouth twitches, not quite a smile. And what does your listening tell you? He asks. Aside from the state of the fields, you choose your next words very carefully. That people are afraid, you say, in the villages, here, of the rain, of the hunger, of men from the south with no land and nothing to lose, of men from Dublin with seals and swords, of your men, my lord. You look up, just for a heartbeat, meeting his gaze. And of you, the hall goes as quiet as the evening of the strange wind. You hear cooks suck in a breath behind you. You feel Master Folk's tension from across the room, like a rope pulled taut. The squire's jaw tightens. You're bold, he says softly. You lower your eyes again. I don't mean disrespect, my lord, you say. Only that fear makes people foolish. My grandmother says it hollows us out inside so the worst in the world can blow right through. In the last lean year in our village, her father gathered everyone and made them speak their thinks aloud. It didn't fill the fields, but it filled them. Enough that they could keep their heads when the hunger bit. Enough that they didn't turn on each other. Enough that when help came, they were still themselves to receive it. Help from where? One of the men scoffs. From the fair folk? From each other, you say simply. From neighbors in the next valley who still had stores. From a lord then who forgave some of the levies, because he realized dead tenants pay no rent. You swallow, my lord. The squire studies you. You can feel his gaze like a weight. He could have you beaten for insolence. He could send you home in disgrace, or not at all. He could declare your whole village rebellious and send more men. Slowly he leans back in his chair. You speak more sense than some men twice your age, he says finally. And more freely, too. The ghost of a smile tugs at his mouth. Your grandmother must be a terror. She is, you say before you think better of it. This time the laughter breaks out fully around the table. The squire lets it crest and fade, then lifts a hand. Enough, he says. This is not a jesting matter. Girl. Yes, my lord, you say, heart-footing. You would have me forgive levies? Loosen my hold while my own lords hold tight? You would risk my people for yours? I would have you see that they are the same people, you say, boldly now, because the path has already been set under your feet. If our villages fall, your hall won't stand long. Hungry men with nothing to lose and nothing to love are dangerous. Men with something left and the sense that their lord sees them as more than tallies on a parchment will defend what's theirs. And yours. You are shaking. But your voice stays steady. The squire's expression shifts through anger, through calculation. through something like reluctant respect. Master Folk clears his throat. My lord, he says carefully, if I may. Our accounts show that if we press the Northern Valley no harder, but redistribute what we take more wisely from richer holdings and cut certain expenses in the hall, he glances at you almost grudgingly. We may make good both your obligations and your tenants, at least this year. The squire drums his fingers on the table. You've been poring over parchments for days and never said this, he says. I did not have all the information, my lord, Folk replies smoothly. Our guest here has clarified matters. You realize with a small shock that the steward is using you as a shield to say something he could not otherwise say without seeming to undermine his master's fear. You have become, in this moment, a conduit. The squire exhales. Very well, he says at last. We'll do as you suggest. Ease off the North Valley, press the larger tenants harder for grain, not coin, where we can. Cut the feasting by half this winter. If I must drink thinner ale so my folk can eat more bread, so be it. But if word spreads that I am soft, his gaze flicks around the table, warning sharp. It stays here. A murmur of assent. He turns back to you. You will say nothing of this when you return, he tells you. If they think their pleas alone moved me, they will not understand the balance. They will grow entitled. His lip curls slightly at the word. Tell them only that I am not a fool, that I know the difference between a tenant and a field. I will tell them you listened, you say. He nods once, sharply. That will do. He waves you away. Your knees feel watery as you turn and walk back to the kitchens, the tray oddly light in your hands now. Cook grabs your arm the moment you're out of earshot of the high table. What did you say to him? She hisses. I've never heard this hall so silent. You swallow, breath coming faster now that the moment has passed. Just truth, you say. Dressed as carefully as I could. She stares at you for a long moment, then shakes her head. You've more guts than sense, she says. But sometimes that's what's needed. She squeezes your arm once, hard. Come on then. If we're to be living on thinner feasts, we'd best make them taste rich as we can. When your fortnight is up, you return to your village. You come home with sore hands, a head full of numbers and faces, and a new awareness of how the lines of power run through the world beyond your fields. You come home with Cook's best recipe for stretching turnips into something almost like stew with meat. You come home with a quiet promise in your pocket that, this year at least, the squire will not squeeze your people until they break. You also come home changed. Your family sees it in the way you walk into the cottage, tired, yes, but straighter, as if some inner rod has hardened. They see it in the way you tell your story, not bragging, not minimizing, but clear. You tell them as much as you can. You leave out the worst of your fear, the nights you wept silently into your palate because you missed the sound of your father's uneven breath. You leave out the way one of the guards looked at you too long before Cook cuffed him smartly on the ear. Some things are yours to carry. But you tell them of the steward's counting, of the squire's counsel, of your own words at the high table, of the decision that came from them. Your mother sits at the table, her hands trembling slightly as she twists her apron. You told him all that? She breathes. Oh, child. Oh, brave, foolish child. Your grandmother smiles, eyes bright with pride. You pulled on the thread you had, she says, and the cloth held. Good. Your father, in his chair, makes a sound that breaks on the edge of laughter and tears both. D, B, he forces out, his good hand thumping on his chest. Grams, girl. It is the first clear word he has managed since his stroke. You laugh, joy bursting out of you bright and surprised. You cross to him and wrap your arms as best you can around his rigid shoulders. Girl, you echo against his cheek. Yes, your girl. Later, as the village learns slowly that the levies will not cut as deep as feared, that the squire has seen reason, as some put it, you watch the way their shoulders ease, the way their steps grow a fraction lighter. They do not know the exact words you spoke. They do not need to. They only need the space those words carved for them. You know. And you know that this is not the end of hardship. There will be more leaning years, in one shape or another. There will be sicknesses with new names. There will be men who are not as willing to listen as this squire was, and storms that heed no pleas from any human mouth. But you also know this. Your family has faced its own calamity and is still standing. Your father's right hand begins, slowly to twitch and curl, then to grip. Your mother, once bowed under the weight of grief and work, stands taller, knowing that her children have taken up some of the load without breaking. Riona finds her voice in the lane, organizing women to share tasks, to watch each other's children, to plan for winter as a group rather than as scattered households. Connor, no longer only the boy you saved from service, grows into a steady hand in the fields, his child's restlessness tempered by the knowledge of what might have been. You, who once thought of yourself as only a listener on the edge of things, have become both listener and speaker. You hear the land's hum, the village's breath, and you answer, sometimes in words, sometimes in a loaf of bread, sometimes in a quiet suggestion at the well. On warm evenings, you sit with Nuala by the door, watching the lane. Children play, shouting and laughing, their feet kicking up dust instead of mud now that summer has come. Old Brid scolds from her stool but cannot hide her fondness. Mora's middle child runs past, cheeks rounder than they were in the spring, a scrap of bread in one hand. Bran walks more easily, thanks to the new plough lash Connor and Thomas learned to fashion together. The wellstone glistens faintly with splashes, its lip worn smoother than ever. Nuala nudges you with her elbow. Look at them, she says, still here, still themselves. You nod. Because of you, she adds. Because of us, you correct quietly. Because we listened, and we answered, together. She smiles. Together, she repeats. The wind stirs then, faint and cool, coming down from the north hills. It brushes your cheek lightly, no longer carrying that sharp, listening stillness it had on that first ominous evening, but something softer. Approval, perhaps, or simple acknowledgement. You touch the worn wooden token in your pocket, still carrying the warmth of your hand after all these weeks. You are still only one small person, in one small village, in a corner of Ireland that may never be marked on the maps of kings. Your family is still only one family among many, but you have learned that there is power in smallness, in closeness, in the threads that bind. You have learned that hardship can bend you, but it does not have to break you, if you bend together. As the sky darkens and the first stars blink into being, you let your breath fall into the same slow rhythm as the villages, in and out, in and out. The sound of a place that has weathered another storm and is settling, for now, into its rest. You close your eyes, listening to the soft murmur of voices, the creak of wood, the rustle of the thatch in the evening breeze, the distant chuckle of the river. You are not alone. You are home. The word settles around you like a blanket, warm and a little frayed at the edges, smelling of peat smoke and stew and wool and river mist. But home is not what it was. Your father's chair by the hearth is now a fixture, as much a part of the cottage as the table or the bedposts. You step around it without thinking, the way water flows around the stone. His presence is a weight in the room, not crushing, but undeniable. The way he watches you move, proud, frustrated, grateful, all at once, has become another kind of weather to navigate. The next morning, you wake to the familiar sounds of your household. The soft thud of your mother's feet on the packed earth, the crackle of kindling coaxed into flame, the mutter of someone talking in their sleep. For a moment before your eyes open, you could almost believe you have dreamed the hall and the steward and the squire's sharp gaze. Then you roll over and see your father's profile in the half-light, the right side still a little slack, the left eye already open and watching the ceiling as if it holds some secret only he can see. Memory returns in a rush, the hall, the council, the squire's grudging nod. Your father's single clear word, girl, you smile without meaning to. Morning, Da, you whisper. His gaze shifts, finds you. The corner of his mouth, on the good side, twitches upward. He says. It's not quite a word, but it's something. His left hand lifts clumsily, fingers opening and closing until you place yours in them. His grip is warm and sure. Your mother turns from the hearth, wooden spoon in hand, eyes already sharp for who is starring. You're awake, she says. Good. Up then. The hens won't feed themselves, and more is coming by for that cheese I promised her. If we send her off empty-handed, she'll shame me in the lane. You push off your palate with a groan that's more habit than real complaint. Your muscles protest the first movement, then settle. You had forgotten, in the hall, how the work here spreads through your body differently. Not the sharp burn of carrying heavy pots up and down stairs, but the steady ache of bending and lifting and walking and stooping from dawn until the light fails. As you pull on your dress and boots, Riona swings down from the loft ladder, hair already braided, sleeves rolled. You're up late, she says, pretending to scowl. What? Did the fine folk at the hall teach you to sleep to the middle of the day? You call this the middle of the day? You retort, gesturing at the faint gray seep of light around the door frame. In summer it is, she says. By this hour in June, we'll have half the field weeded. It's not June, you point out. Yet. She bumps your shoulder lightly as she passes. Come on, slow coach. Connor tumbles down next, all elbows and bare feet, hair sticking up in improbable directions. Did they have meat every day? He demands without preamble as he lands. Proper meat? Not just the bone to wave over the pot? Your mother snorts. Listen to him, she says. Hasn't even broken his fast and he's dreaming of other men's tables. Connor ignores her, eyes locked on you with desperate curiosity. Well, he presses, did they? You think of the squire's high table, the platters of roasted pork, the glistening fat, the servants carrying away more scraps than your family would see in a month. Yes, you say slowly, they had meat, but they also had fear, and cold stones, and men who shout more than they laugh. I wouldn't trade our table for theirs, Con. He wrinkles his nose, unconvinced, but a flicker of something like pride crosses his face at your words, at the idea you would choose this cramped cottage over that high hall. You still haven't told me if you brought me anything. He grumbles, half teasing, half hopeful. You grin and reach for the small pouch you've kept knotted inside your dress since you left the hall. I didn't have coin to spare, you say, and the squire wouldn't have thanked me for pocketing his spoons. But Cook, you pull out a small, wrapped bundle. Cook gave me this. You unfold the scrap of cloth. Inside lies a heel of coarse bread, sweeter than any you've had at home, studded with dried berries and a few precious hazelnuts. It is not large, Cook had muttered about mouths to feed and wasteful charity, but to Connor's eyes it might as well be a treasure. His face lights. Then, to your surprise, he hesitates. We should share it, he says, glancing at your parents. Your grandmother, who has been pretending to doze in her chair, cracks one eye open. Good lad, she says. You almost had me fooled into thinking you were just a stomach with legs. He grins, cheeks coloring, and divides the bread with more unevenness than he thinks, but enough fairness to make your mother's mouth soften. You eat your small piece slowly, letting the unfamiliar flavors sit on your tongue. It tastes of someone else's kitchen, someone else's fires. It also tastes, now, of your brother's choice to share. That part is familiar and dear. After breakfast, the day unrolls in its old pattern, with new knots. You and Riona shoulder the yoke. You draw water, you scatter feed for the hens, you check the fence posts, you help your mother turn your father in his chair, gently stretching his right arm and leg the way Nuala has shown you, trying to coax the nerves into remembering their work. He grimaces with each movement, not in pain exactly, but in the frustration of effort that yields so little. You murmur encouragement, feeling clumsy and inadequate. He'll get some of it back, Nuala says quietly as she watches. Maybe more than you think. The body has deep river ways. Sometimes they carve new channels. Do you really think so? You ask, needing her certainty even when you know she cannot promise. I think your father's too stubborn to let half of himself lie idle for long, she says. And I think he's got reason enough to fight. She nods at you, at your mother, at Connor busy in the yard. More reason than some men ever have. In the afternoon, you walk the village. You find Mora outside her cottage, hanging washing on a line strung between the wall and a crooked post. The children chase each other through the hanging shirts, turning them into ghosts and tents. Her face, when she sees you, crumples with relief and worry both. You're back, she says, as if she hadn't quite believed it would happen. We have a mind to march down there and statue ourselves if they kept you longer. With what army? You tease gently. You and old Brid with her spoon? Don't scoff at the spoon, Mora says, straightening. I've seen her chase off a drunk with nothing but that and a curse. You laugh. The sound feels good in your chest. Did they treat you well? She asks then, quieter. Well enough, you say. Cook kept a sharper eye on wandering hands than I could have. The steward worked me near to death with numbers and tallies, but I learned from it. And the squire, you hesitate, then let the truth stand. The squire listened, in the end. God be praised for small miracles, Mora mutters. Then, more briskly, well, if you're back, we can get on with that plan of your grandmother's. Plan? You repeat, startled. Mora's eyes dance. Did you think we were sitting idle while you were off playing Lady of the Hall? She says. Nuala's been stirring us up like hens in a yard. Talking of remembering and speaking aloud what holds us, and other such notions. She says if trouble's coming, we'd best weave our nets tight now. She's right. Curse her wise old bones. You blink. You hadn't realized that, while you were gone, Nuala had been planting her own seeds. What did she propose? You ask. Curiosity and a small flare of pride mix in. A gathering, Mora says, at the well. Not just for water and gossip, but for, what did she call it? Telling the threads. Having us say plainly what we can give and what we need, not in whispers behind doors, but out where we can hear one another. She wants to do it soon. She was waiting for you. For me? You echo, thrown. Aye, Mora says. You started this listening business. She says your ears are tuned right, that you'll hear currents the rest of us miss. And you've been to the hall now. Talks there or no? You've seen more of how their world works than most of us ever will. That matters. The idea of standing up in front of the whole village, helping to shape something as nebulous and enormous as caught. What we need and what we can give makes your stomach flutter. I'm not, you begin, anyone special? Mora finishes, rolling her eyes. So you keep saying, yet here you are, with your head full of Lord's worries, and your hands still good for kneading Dell. That's special enough. You'll come tonight? You swallow. Yes, you say. I'll come. Good, Mora says briskly. Now help me with this line before it snaps and sends my good shirts into the mud. We can't have me showing up to Nuala's grand gathering with stains on my sleeves. She'd never let me hear the end of it. The sun slides toward the hills, its light filtered through thin, racing clouds. The air cools, carrying the smell of damp earth and smoke. One by one, doors open. People drift toward the wide spot in the lane where the well stands. It is not a market day. There is no feast, no saints' festival, no wedding. Yet the feeling has a similar weight, an awareness that tonight is not like other nights. You stand with your family near the front, close to the well. Your father's chair has been hauled out, with much good-natured grumbling, and set where he can see and, more importantly, be seen. Your mother stands behind him, one hand on the back of the chair, the other wrapped tightly in her shawl. Connor fidgets beside you. Riona's chin is up, her eyes narrowed, taking the measure of the gathering. Nuala stands by the wellstone like a small weathered pillar. In the failing light, Her lined face looks carved from the same rock. Her walking stick is planted firmly in the earth. When enough people have gathered, Nuala lifts her stick and bangs it lightly against the well's rim. "Listen," she says. The murmur conversation ebbs. "For years now," she begins, "we've met here to draw water and words. We've gossiped and grumbled, shared news and bread and the odd sharper mark. The well has heard it all and held its tongue. But the land has shifted under us. You can feel it. The rains, the taxes, the sickness, the men from the hall, the fear." She sweeps her gaze across the circle of faces. "If we each go on facing these alone, inside our own four walls, we'll crack like clay in the sun. If we face them together," she taps the stone, "we may yet hold." Someone coughs, uneasy. A baby wails, then quiets against its mother's shoulder. "I'm not a priest," Nuala continues. "I won't give you a sermon. I'm not a lord. I've no decrees to issue. I'm an old woman who's seen a few more winters than you. And I say this, the first thing we must do, before we start flailing at problems like thatch in a wind, is to see truly where we stand. Who has what? Who lacks what? Who's strong where others are weak and weak where others are strong? We all know some of it in scraps. Tonight we speak it plain. There is a rustle through the crowd of apprehension, of curiosity. Speak our needs, someone says, out loud. Won't that make us look beggarly? We're already beggars if we hide our needs until they break us, Nuala snaps, sharper. Pride won't fill your bellies come winter. Pride won't lift your sick man from his bed. Pride is a fine cloak in the feast hall, but a poor one in a storm. Her gaze softens slightly. I don't say you must pour out your whole heart in front of your neighbor, but say this much: what burden is too heavy for your own back alone? And say also what strength you have left. A skill, a goat that still gives milk, a strong pair of arms, a sharp memory, a loud voice, wherever it is, so we can see the shape of us. She turns, suddenly, toward you. "And we'll start with my granddaughter," she says. Your stomach drops. The eyes of the village, which had been circling, now fix on you. You glance at your mother. She gives you a small, encouraging nod, though her face is tense. You step forward, feeling the packed earth under your boots, the cool gaze of the well at your side, the press of Nuala's presence at your back. The silence is a living thing. You clear your throat. You stop, annoyed at yourself. You have stood in front of a lord and spoken. You can stand in front of your own people. "I'm your neighbor," you say instead of your name, because names feel small beside the web of ties that define you. "I'm Sean McCohen's daughter. Riona's sister. Connor's too. Nuala's granddaughter. I've been to the squire's hall and back. I know a little of reading and numbers. I can carry water and lift my father. I can listen. I can notice." You take a breath. "Our family has lost half our fields to the rain. My father's right side is still half asleep. We won't be able to bring in a full harvest without help. That's our need, but we have a strong son for the plow, a daughter who can weave and mend, a grandmother whose head is full of stories and sense, a mother who can stretch a pot of stew so far it near breaks. We can share those things." You wait for the judgment, the pity, the awkward shuffling. What comes first is Moel's deep voice. "You forgot one thing," he says from somewhere near the back. "What's that?" you ask, wary. "You," he says simply. "You're more than ears and hands. You're the one who walked to that hall and stood up to a man who holds your life in his fist. That's his strength, whether you see it or no. It's worth something to all of us." A murmur of assent follows. Your cheeks burn, but there is a warmth in your chest that is not entirely embarrassment. Nuala nods, satisfied. "Good," she says. She set the shape. Who's next? There is a brief, painful pause. Then Mora steps forward, shifting the baby on her hip. "I'm Mora," she says. "Widow these 3 years. I've 3 little ones and a patch of stones I call a field. My need is simple. I can't always be in 2 places at once. If I'm in the field, there's no one in the house with the babes. If I'm in the house, the weeds laugh at me. I've no man to trade labor with, but I can sew. My stitches are neater than any of you, and you know it. I can bake bread that rises high even on a cold day. I can share that. If someone can sit with my children a few days when the planting's thick, I'll mend your clothes till your toes forget what holes feel like. A ripple of soft laughter, of recognition. I'll watch them, Riona says, stepping up without waiting. I've 2 hands and no babes of my own, and if I'm to be a terror like Nuala one day, I'd best get practice bossing little ones. Mora huffs a laugh, the tightness around her eyes easing. Done, she says. Who else? Nuala prods. Slowly, like seeds taking root, others come forward. Bran, with his bad back, admits he cannot lift fence posts like he once did, but can still set a straight furrow if someone else does the worst of the heaving. Thomas, blustering, confesses he has 2 sound arms and time to spare when his own small plot is seen to, but no head for when to plant which seed. I go by the itch in my fingers, not the sky. Rid offers her knowledge of herbs in exchange for someone to fix the hole in her roof before next winter. Each admission of need feels, at first, like a small humiliation, like taking off a cloak in front of a crowd. But as the pattern grows, you see something shift. No one stands alone in their lack. Each need finds, if not an immediate answer, then at least ears that have heard it, hearts that have weighed it. Each strength once spoken aloud seems to expand, as if being named gives it room to stretch. By the time the twilight has deepened to true dusk, the path between your cottages and fields has been rerouted in 100 tiny ways. Mara will spend 2 mornings a week at your hearth, mending and minding, while you and Riona split time between your own field and hers. Tomas and Connor will work together on Bran's fence, with Bran directing from the ground, his knowledge flowing through their younger hands. Old Brid will show you which plants growing by the ditch are good for easing coughs, in exchange for Connor climbing her rafters to patch that roof. Nothing material has changed yet. The rain still falls, the squire still sits in his hall, your father's hand still trembles when he tries to lift it, but the air, as Nuala once said of her leaning year, feels lighter. As people drift back to their homes, talking more softly now, a new hum threads through the village. Not the low murmur of fear you've grown used to these past months, but something more like purpose. You stand by the well a moment longer, palm on the cool stone. Do you feel that? You murmur. It does not answer, of course. But under your hand, the rock feels steady, solid. The water below thrums with the same quiet fullness you first learned to hear. Nuala comes to stand beside you. Well done, she says. I only said what we all could see, you protest. Most folk trip over what they can see, she replies. Speaking it plain takes more courage than you think. She pats your arm. This was the first weaving. There'll be more. We'll need them. Because of what's coming? You ask, that old unease stirring. She shrugs one sharp shoulder. Because something is always coming, she says. Good or ill. The world doesn't sit still just because we want it to. Best to keep our nets mended. The weeks that follow are full in a new way. Every day still brings its share of drudgery, dung to be shoveled, pans to be scoured, clothes to be patched, water to be hauled. But now, woven through your own tasks, are threads of other people's. You spin one morning at Mora's, your hands deep in dough, as you learn the knack of trapping warmth in it, of coaxing it to rise high even when the air is cool. She laughs at your first lumpy attempts, then nods approvingly when your third loaf comes out of the oven with a crust just right. You've a feel for it, she says. Bread's like people. If you knock it about too hard, it sulks. Too soft, and it goes flat. You've to stretch it just enough, and then let it be. You tuck that metaphor away, another way of thinking about the village itself. In return, she watches your father and Connor for an afternoon while your mother walks with you and Riona to Bran's fence. Under Bran's instruction, You learn how to wedge the posts so they hold firm against the next heavy rain, how to read the land slope to know where the water will try to drag the soil away. You don't fight water by pretending it isn't there. Bran grunts, leaning on his stick as he directs you. You guide it where it can do the least harm. Same with trouble of most kinds. You are starting to see a pattern in these lessons. Old Brid, when Connor patches her roof, calls you both down and sits you on her stool while she rummages in a cracked clay jar. These are for winter coughs, she says, holding up a bundle of dried leaves that smell faintly of mint and earth. These are for fevers. Another bundle, these with a sharper, bitter scent. These ones'll make you see your grandmother's dead cat dancing on the table. So don't touch them, unless you want a voice like mine telling you how stupid you are for the rest of your days. Connor giggles. You stifle a smile. May I feel them? You ask. She raises an eyebrow but lays a few sprigs in your palm. Again, you are surprised by how your awareness shifts when you attend fully. The textures, velvety, coarse, brittle, the weight or lightness of each. The way some scents seem to open your chest while others curl the back of your tongue. Everything around you is talking, Brid says, watching you. Stones, plants, people. Most folks just hear noise. You and that grandmother of yours seem set on learning the language. She snorts. Sometimes that's a blessing. Sometimes it's a headache. But it can save your life, if you let it. You look up sharply. Has it saved yours? You ask. She shrugs, eyes going distant. More than once, she says. When I was younger and stupider than you, I thought the only voices that mattered came from men with rings on their fingers and books in their hands. Then I watched one of those men ignore the way his horse's flank quivered and his dog whined, and he rode straight into a pit that killed him. The dog howled for a day. The land had spoken. He'd plugged his ears with his own importance. You think of the squire, of Master Folk, of the way their world could so easily have crushed yours if they had not been nudged just a little into hearing. You file Brid's story away with the others. As summer edges closer, the village shifts again. The rain does not stop, that it grows less relentless. There are more clear days between the downpours. The river, still higher than usual, begins to settle into its banks. The ruined lower fields remain a muddy scar, but higher up, where the earth has clung stubbornly to itself, shoots of green push through. The planting is late, but not lost. You work until your back aches and your hands blister, dropping seed, covering it, pulling weeds that surge up with infuriating vigor wherever the soil has been turned. You and Connor trade the heavier tasks back and forth. Rihanna moves between your field and Mara's and Bran's, her quick hands learning every patch of earth as if it were an extension of your own. Your father insists on being brought to the field some days. He sits on a low stool at the edge, his bad legs stretched awkwardly out, watching each movement with hawk-sharp eyes. When anyone falters, his left hand lifts, miming the right way to hold the hoe, the better angle to thrust the seed. Gill, lower. He manages to say to Connor one morning, jaw working hard around the word. L, lean, in. Connor obeys, face lighting at the fact that his father's instruction is coming not just in gestures, but in sound. Afterward, when you help your father back to his chair at home, he is exhausted. His eyelids droop, his breath sounds heavy, but there is a satisfaction in the set of his mouth that you haven't seen since before the stroke. The says, almost to himself. Yes, you echo. One evening, when the day has been long and your arms feel like sacks of wet grain, you sit by the river to let the cool air and the hush of moving water leach some of the ache from you. The river has always been part of the village's hum, a steady shushing that underpins birdsong and voices and the clatter of daily life. Tonight, with the sun sinking and the first stars daring to peep through the thinning clouds, it feels louder, or perhaps you were simply listening harder. You close your eyes. The sound is not uniform. There are trickles and glugs, swirls where the current hits a rock, small eddies where leaves spin lazily. You picture the river as a long, sinuous creature, winding through hills and valleys, carrying news from places you will never see. What are you thinking? A voice asks behind you. You start, then relax when you recognize Riona's tread. Though we're like this river, you say. We only see the bit that flows past our feet, but it comes from places we can't imagine and goes to places that don't know we exist. Riona drops down beside you, stretching her legs. That sounds like something Nula would say, she remarks. I've been infected, you reply. Soon I'll be speaking nothing but riddles and weather. She laughs softly. You already do, she says. Then, more seriously, I worry about you, you know. Me? You say, incredulous. Why? You listen so hard, she answers. To everyone, to everything. Sometimes I think you'll forget your own voice in the middle of all that noise. You chew on that. I don't think listening makes my voice smaller. You say slowly. I think it makes it better aimed, like an arrow that knows where the wind is going. Trust you to turn it into a poem, she mutters. You sound like you disapprove, you tease. I disapprove of you putting yourself in front of lords and councils before you've even had your first proper courting, she fires back. Who knows what trouble that tongue of yours will bring you? You bump her shoulder. Any trouble I get in, you'll be right there, you say. Admitting you taught me half my stubbornness. She huffs, but you see the curve of her mouth. Silence sills over you again, companionable. Fireflies, those tiny, floating stars, begin to flicker in the reeds. A frog croaks. Somewhere upriver, a splash hints at a fish beating against the current. I spoke with Moel, Riona says suddenly. Oh, you respond, intrigued. About what? His apprentice, she answers. Gavin. He's been talking of time in other villages. Says there are places where the lords are worse, and places where they're softer. Places where the church holds more sway than the sword, and places the other way around. She shifts, picking up a pebble and tossing it into the water. I asked him whether a person like you would have made any difference in those places. Or if it's only that our squire was half willing to listen already. You feel a sting of something like defensiveness. And what did he say? You ask carefully. That you can't make a man hear who's determined to be death, she says bluntly. But you can make the ones around him stir. You can give the ones under him language for what they feel but can't name. Sometimes that's enough to tip a balance. You let out a breath you hadn't realized you were holding. I don't want anyone thinking I believe I changed everything, you say. I didn't. The steward had already been thinking about the numbers. The squire already had fear twitching in his belly. I just pushed. A little. Riona leans her head briefly against her shoulder. I know, she says. You don't strut about like Tomas after he lifts a sack of grain without dropping it. That's one of the things that makes me proud of you. She pauses. But you're allowed to know you mattered. The words settle between you, as gentle and insistent as the river's flow. You think of all the times you've tried to convince yourself you are only this or just that. Only a girl, just a listener. Only one family among many, just a village on a map that no king will ever glance at. Perhaps it is time to stop using only and just like stones to weigh yourself down. The river runs on, carrying away some of your old hesitations with it. Summer arrives in a rush. 1 week the air still bites your fingers in the morning. The next, the sun is a blunt weight on your shoulders by midday, and the dust in the lane rises in little puffs underfoot. The thatch on the roofs dries to a pale gold. The hedges thicken and buzz with insects. Children begin to shed layers of wool, their skinny limbs turning brown strong under the longer days. The fields, miracle of miracles, green. It is not a lush, easy greening. There are bare patches where the soil has been washed away. The lower plots closer to the river lie mostly ruined, a reminder that nature's temper is not always gentle. But on the higher ground, the barley and oats push up with stubborn life, small blades reaching for the sky. You and Connor and Riona weed and thin, curse crows and chase them, Sing snatches of songs to keep your arms moving when your backs ache too much to straighten. Some nights you fall into bed so tired that even your dreams are of pulling, lifting, bending. In the morning, your body complains, then resigns itself, and starts again. In the midst of this grind, smaller stories play out, turning hardship into something more textured than simple suffering. Moore's youngest takes his first steps in your kitchen, tottering from the table to the hearth, while you and your mother cheer him on and his siblings shriek with delighted jealousy. Old Bread finally lets Connor climb the rafters to fix that leaking roof. And if you fall, boy, I'll tan what's left of you myself. And afterward, she sits him down and tells him a long, convoluted tale about a warrior who tried to outsmart the weather and ended up married to a storm cloud. Bran's back gives out fully one morning with a sickening crack. For a moment, the village buzzes with panic. If Bran can't even stand, how will his already fragile holding survive? But by nightfall, Tomas and Moel have rigged a strange, wheeled contraption from an old cart and some broken plow pieces. Bran sits on it like a reluctant king, grumbling, but the way his eyes glisten as he rolls out to the edge of his field to shout instructions at whoever's working tells you all you need to know. Your father, too, begins to find new ways of being. He will never, you think, walk the fields from one end to the other with the easy, even stride he once had. The damage done inside his skull has cut some wires that no amount of will can fully mend. But there are other paths. He learns, slowly, to speak again. The first weeks, his words are like stones pushed uphill, hard-won, few, and often slipping back. He sweats with the effort of shaping even simple sounds, his brow furrowing, his mouth trembling. Sometimes, in frustration, he lapses into muttered curses, in a dialect so old even Nuala has to squint to catch them. Your mother, patient but exhausted, repeats phrases with him in the evenings. Pass the salt. Shut the door. Mind the fire. Good day, Mora. Simple exchanges, the building blocks of his place in the village. You and Connor and Riona turn it into a game. Who can get Da to say river first? Connor challenges one afternoon. Your father glares at him, then at you, then looks deliberately at the river through the open door. Rye, there, he grinds out, jaw working. Connor whoops. He said it, he cries. He said it for me first. You hear that? Your father snorts, but his eyes crinkle. He has claimed a small, ridiculous victory, too. Later, when the others are occupied, you sit beside him with a scrap of charcoal and a bit of old parchment that Father O'Rourke gave you. Show me, you say quietly, in marks, not words, if you like, what you're thinking. He frowns, puzzled. Then, slowly, his left hand reaches for the charcoal. His grip is clumsy, but he manages. He draws first a rough outline of the village, an oval for the lane, squares for the cottages, a circle for the well. Then he adds the fields, little patches with scribbled lines to show rising ground. Then arrows, small and larger, curving down from the hills and into the valley, converging at the river. Wah, tear, he says, tapping one arrow. Fall, here. He taps a place where the bank has worn away more each year. You nod, understanding dawning. You're saying, we should dig a ditch here, you say, tracing a line where no line yet lies, to take some of that water away before it eats more field. He nods, relief shining in his eyes that you have followed his halting map. You had known your father as a worker of the land, his knowledge stored in muscles and habits. You are only now seeing him as something else as well, a thinker of it, someone who can read the shape of a hillside the way you read a line of ink. You can still guide us, you say softly, even if you can't walk the line yourself. His throat works. For once, he doesn't try to shape the words. He just squeezes your hand. The next day, you take the parchment to Bran and Moel and Thomas. Da thinks if we dig here, you say, pointing, we can save the upper part of the field from washing away next time the river swells. And maybe help Bran's lower plot too. They study the marks, skeptical at first. Then Bran grunts. He's not wrong, he admits. The land slopes like that. I felt it under my boots, though I never thought to map it. He gives you a keen look. If your daw's head's working like this now, we'd be fools not to use it. Within a week, half the village is out with spades and picks carving a new channel into the earth, where your father's charcoal line suggested. It is hard, back-breaking labor, the kind that leaves your shoulders burning and your palms blistered. But there is something exhilarating about it too, reshaping the land, just a little, to give yourselves a better chance. Father O'Rourke comes by while you work, sleeves rolled, cheeks flushed from more than just effort. This is good work, he says between shovelfuls, practical and hopeful. I'll add prayers to it, but I suspect God likes to see you picking up spades as much as rosaries. Nuala snorts from where she sits on a low stone, supervising. God gave us backs and sense, she mutters. He'd be sore put out if we didn't use them. You think of your father at home, tracing lines on parchment, and feel a swell of fierce hope. He is not lost. None of you are. Not yet. Late that summer, a new kind of visitor comes to the village. You are at the well when he arrives, a lanky man with travel-stained robes, a leather satchel slung over one shoulder, and a thin, sun-browned face half hidden by a beard. He leads a small mule loaded with what looks like rolled cloths and a few carefully wrapped bundles. A wooden cross hangs from a cord at his neck, but his robe is neither the simple brown of the brothers you've seen before, nor the rich black of higher monastic orders. It is a gray somewhere in between, like the sky before a storm. He stops by the well, lets the mule drink, and straightens with a groan of relief. God save all here, he calls in the general direction of anyone listening. And you, Brid replies from her stool. She eyes him narrowly. You're not one of O'Rourke's lot. I've come from farther than his parish, the man answers, smiling faintly. I'm Brother Aemon. I walk between houses, you might say, carrying words, and lately, warnings. Your ears prick at that last word. Warnings, you echo, before you can stop yourself. He looks at you, taking in your age, your dress, the way your hands still drip slightly from the last bucket you hauled. Aye, he says, though not the kind I like giving. Can I trouble you for a cup of water and a place to sit a spell? I've been on my feet since first light. Brid snorts. You'd best talk to Nuala, she says. She collects words the way hens collect pebbles. You offer the stranger a wooden cup, fill it from the bucket, and nod toward your cottage. My grandmother's there, you say, and my da. They'll want to hear what you have to say. And you? He asks, with a tilt of his head. I always want to hear you say simply. He smiles, more fully this time. Then lead on, girl who listens, he says. As you walk, he asks small questions, how long the rain lasted, whether the fields recovered, whether any sickness passed through in its wake. You answer as best you can, curiosity burning to know why he asks, but holding your tongue as Nuala has taught you. Let someone empty their own cup before you tip yours. Inside your cottage, the air is its usual mix of smoke and stew and wool and people. Nuala sits in her chair, spinning flax between her fingers. Your father occupies his spot by the hearth, whittling clumsy shapes with his left hand, more for the feel of doing than the result. Your mother is at the table, sorting dried herbs. Connor is on the floor, trying to teach the cat a trick it has no interest in learning. They all look up as you enter with Brother Aemon. God save the house, he says again, bowing his head slightly. And you, if you're worth it. Nuala replies tartly. Who are you, and what do you carry? News, he answers. Stories, some hope, some fear, and a few stolen apples. But I've already eaten those. Your mother laughs despite herself, the tension easing a hair. Sit, she says, gesturing to a stool. You'll take some stew? As he eats, he talks. He has come from the south, from villages squeezed harder than yours by lords less inclined to listen than your squire. He speaks of a band of men, former soldiers, some say, or simply farmers with nothing left, who have taken to the woods, attacking tax carts and waylaying travelers with coin. Some call them bandits, some, quietly, call them heroes. He speaks of a sickness in a coastal town, not the Black Death of old, but a fever that burns quick and bright, leaving some in shrouds and others staggering through recovery. He also speaks of small resistances, of a village that refused to let the squire's men take their last breeding sow, standing in the lane with pitchforks and scythes and the priest at their head. Of a widow who sheltered a wounded outlaw and patched him up with nothing but rags and stubbornness. Of a group of women who began meeting at their own well each full moon, trading not just bread and mending, but tales of what they had managed to change in their tiny corners. You listen, breath caught. These women, Mula says, what do they call themselves? Nothing, Brother Eamon says with a shrug. They say they're only neighbors talking, but their talk has teeth. Mula's eyes gleam. Good, she says. Talk without teeth is just noise. What of our squire? Your mother asks. Do you pass his hall? I do, he replies. He grumbles, like all of his kind, says the rain ruined him, the levies press him, the king bleeds him, but he is less harsh than some. Word is, in the North Valley, he's eased his demands a little. Says he has reason to believe they'll make it good another year. Brother Eamon gives you a sideways glance, as if he guesses more than you've told him about your role in that. Your chest tightens with a strange mix of relief and something like responsibility. Your words at the high table have rippled farther than you knew. And the bandits? Connor chimes in, eyes bright. Have you seen them? Connor, your mother scolds. They're dangerous men, not heroes from a tale. They may be both, Brother Eamon says mildly. I've seen their work, an overturned cart, a guard with his head broken open. Not pretty. But I've also heard of them leaving a sack of stolen grain on a poor widow's doorstep in another valley. He sighs. Desperate men do desperate things. Sometimes they become monsters. Sometimes they become something else. Either way, they're a sign of the times. People pushed too far will always find ways to push back. Will they come here, you ask? Hard to say, he answers. Your valley's out of the way. Not much to tempt men looking for rich pickings. But if the squire tightens his fist too much, some may slip through his fingers and end up in places he doesn't expect. Or if word spreads that you're softer, he trails off, shrugging. Trouble moves toward both weakness and strength. It likes cracks. You think of your ditch, of the way you are trying to guide the river's force, not stop it. You think of the well gatherings, the woven webs of mutual help. We're mending our cracks, you say quietly. He studies you more closely. I believe you, he says. After he eats, he offers something in return for your hospitality. I've no coin, he says, and my back's as weary as yours by the look of it. But I can offer words, teach a letter or two, if you like. Or tell a tale that's not your own, to remind you the world is wide. Your eyes light. Letters, you say at once. Tales too, but letters first. For Connor, for Rihanna, for anyone who wants them. Connor groans. Do I have to? He grumbles. I've enough to do without ink. You'll thank me when you can mark your own bargains and not trust another man's hand. Your mother says. You'll learn. Riona, to your amusement, looks intrigued rather than put upon. If I can read Father O'Rourke's sermons before he speaks them, she murmurs, I'll know when to pretend to be moved. Brother Eamon laughs. You're a dangerous one, he says. Very well. After supper, we'll scratch some letters in the dirt. Ink can come later. That evening, children and a handful of curious adults gather outside your cottage. Brother Eamon kneels and, with a stick, draws shapes on the packed earth. A, B, C, in the Latin he uses for his own texts. Then the Irish letters more familiar to your ears. He teaches you to see them not as dead marks, but as sounds caught and tamed. He shows Connor how the same shape can hold different voices depending on where it sits. He praises Riona's quick memory. Your father watches from his chair, eyes bright. At one point he grunts and points with his left hand at a crooked letter Connor has drawn. "Enen." "No," he says. "Here." He corrects it with a trembling finger. Connor blinks, then grins. "You're smarter than me even without half your head," he declares. Your father chuckles, the sound rusty but real. You realize, with a sudden jolt, that this circle of learning, of shared stories, of new skills, is as much a defense against hardship as any ditch or fence. A mind that can read, can count, can tell its own story is harder to crush. Brother Eamon stays only 2 nights. On the morning he leaves, he stands by the lane, adjusting the mule's packs, while half the village offers him bundles of bread, dried herbs, a bit of cheese. He protests, but not very hard. "Where will you go now?" you ask. "East," he says. "There's a monastery there that's taken heavy losses to fever. They need hands to copy texts before they're lost." He pats his satchel. "And there's a widow in the valley beyond who writes to me, asking for news. I bring it when I can." "You carry more than words," you say. He smiles. "So do you," he replies. "You know that, don't you?" You shrug, uncomfortable under the praise and yet drawn to it. "I carry my village," you say. "A little piece of it, anyway." "Good," he says. "Carry it well. And if the bandits come, or new edicts from above, or sickness, or any of the other 1,000 things this world likes to throw at people who are just trying not to drown, remember, you're not the only ones fighting the current. There are others all over, digging their own ditches." You watch him walk away, the mule's hooves kicking up small puffs of dust. When he disappears over the rise, the lane seems, for a moment, too quiet. The first snow falls a week later, just enough to powder the roofs and dust the lane. The children squeal and pelt each other with handfuls of it until their fingers go numb. The cold settles in your lungs, sharp and clean. You draw closer to the hearth. Outside, under the snow, the seeds you planted sleep. Inside, something in you is also resting, gathering strength for a spring you cannot yet see.